Welcome to Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age, the show designed to help make middle age your prime time of life by defying the notion that once you reach 40, 50, or even 60 years old, your crowning achievements are all behind you. Regardless of whether you're just approaching 40 or firmly entrenched in your middle years, it's time to launch your very own personal journey toward a joyful and purpose-filled second half of life. Each week, host Roy Richards, an expert on midlife renewal and author of A Midlife Challenge, Wake Up, will discuss the challenges common to middle age and help guide you to a brighter tomorrow. Now, here's Roy.
Well, welcome to Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age. And today we're going to talk again about a subject that comes up every now and then, teenagers. You know, they're moody, defiant, and sexually awkward. They have bad hair days, their voices change, and they take chances that horrify us as parents. And let's be honest, they can be animals. And exactly, say my next guest, biologist Barbara Natterson-Horowitz, MD, and science writer Kathryn Bowers. And they're here to help us better understand the behavior of our teenagers and compare that to adolescents' behavior in a variety of other animals. And here's their bios. Dr. Barbara Natterson-Horowitz, MD, is a visiting professor at Harvard University in the Department of Human Evolutionary Biology, and she's also a professor of medicine and cardiology at UCLA, where she co-founded their evolutionary medicine department. And Kathryn Bowers is a science journalist who has taught medical narrative and comparative literature at UCLA, and she's also a future True Fellow at the New America in Washington, D.C., and was an editor of Zocalo Public Square in Los Angeles. And together, Dr. Natterson-Horowitz and Ms. Bowers have co-authored two books, Zoo Ubiquity, and the book that we'll talk about today, WILDHOOD, the epic journey from adolescence to adulthood in humans and other animals. And hello, ladies, and welcome to Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here and to talk about everything adolescence, wild animals, whatever you have.
Well, I'm interested in your title of your book, WILDHOOD. You use that as a title. What exactly is WILDHOOD as you define it?
Well, WILDHOOD is the period of life across all species and back in evolutionary time between puberty and the emergence of a mature adult. So we set out with the question to see whether there were patterns and shared behaviors between what we saw in human adolescents and other species. And what we learned was that there's incredible parallels and shared connections. And we realized that there wasn't really a good word for that, because when we talk about teenagers in humans, first of all, 13 to 19 is no longer really the definition of adolescence. If you talk to neurobiologists, earlier,
and for a lot of people it ends later.
Exactly right. And then also, I'm sure we all know human beings who might be chronologically adult, but maybe not behaviorally adults. And so we wanted a definition.
I've known a few of those in my time.
I'm sure we all know someone. And we wanted a term that would clearly encompass the physical changes of puberty, physical and brain changes that happen after puberty, and then we made it more of a competency-based rubric for maturity, which are these 4 core competencies that we believe every animal needs to acquire.
Yeah, that was the next question I was going to ask you. What are these 4 competencies that these adolescents must master to progress out of wildhood?
So these came out of our study at Harvard and at UCLA of again the common behaviors that we saw across species, from really fish and reptiles through mammals and birds, and they are how to stay safe from predators, that want to eat you and exploiters that want to take advantage of you. Number two is how to navigate social hierarchies and find places in groups. Number three is how to communicate sexuality and interpret the desire of others and potential mates. And then the fourth one is how to leave the nest and fend for yourself. So
how to feed
it
yourself
really boils down.
Take care and provide for yourself. That's obvious.
Exactly right. It really boils down to finding food is an imperative for any living creature, and they don't all know how to do it the moment they leave the nest.
Oh, I thought you just went to the local grocery store.
Exactly.
Well, is the following statement true or false? Raging hormones and rapidly changing teenage brains are unique to human beings.
I'm going to let Barbara take that one.
Right. Well, it turns out they are not. And, of course, the human brain is unique in all kinds of ways, but, the brain of every species is unique. One of the things we found, however, was that across a very wide range of animal species, and, we're talking about from fish to birds to other mammals, that the brains of animals that have gone through puberty but aren't yet mature adults are different. And they're different in ways that help them do the things they need to do to become mature adults. So it's not just humans. And by the way, it's kind of interesting, puberty itself, when, those hormones start to kick in, it's really similar across species. And we even studied dinosaur puberty. And, of course, we had to call that chapter Jurassic puberty.
We had fun with that chapter.
Did you actually observe any dinosaurs?
Only their descendants.
Well, through fascinating narratives throughout your book, you follow the adolescence of four very unique members of the animal kingdom. What are the four animals that you followed? I thought this was really interesting.
Oh, well, yes. First of all, the four animals are all real-life animals that were tracked by scientists over months and, in some cases, years in the wild. These scientists were studying them for other reasons, but Barbara and I went into their data and extrapolated and then synthesized the aspects that had to do with adolescence in particular. And we have a king penguin living off Antarctica whose name is Ursula, and and she one day has to dive into the ocean and face a leopard seal predator. We also have a spotted hyena named Shrink who lives in the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. We have a humpback whale named Salt, who is now around 50 years old, but she's been sighted in the Gulf of Maine off of Massachusetts for the past, since about 1970s, and she commutes, she migrates between the Dominican Republic and the Gulf of Maine. And then finally there was a European wolf named Slavic who sets out one day on an adventure where he almost drowns and almost freezes to death and gets lost, and then finally finds a new home just outside Verona after crossing the Italian Alps. And we should also point out that the names Ursula, Shrink, Salt, and Slavic, those were not names we made up. Those were the names that the scientists who were studying them gave to those particular animal individuals.
Well, that's interesting.
But we chose each of these. We really wanted to have actual wild animal adolescents as a way of having readers identify with each one of them, because all of us are Ursula the penguin, jumping off, for the first time leaving home, and all of us did.
How you relate as the penguin jumps into the water with all those leopard sharks, or seals, I guess they are. They're not sharks, but they're huge predators of penguins, and it's so much like how we jump off from our parents' home and into perilous waters. We may not be eaten by a leopard seal, but we may be taken advantage of by financially by a predator. We can have unsafe sex and end up altering, maybe radically changing our entire lives before we're ready to have kids. We can become addicted to drugs and other unsafe things. We can also kill ourselves with reckless driving or injure ourselves severely. So there's a lot of predators, you might call it, out there. So it definitely.
Yeah. I love the name of your podcast, and one of the things that I was thinking about as I was, getting ready for this interview was, in middle age, a lot of us are parents of adolescents. I know that I was, and it's a really stressful period for parents, having an adolescent kid. And one of the hard things is when your kid is physically old enough to be outside of your direct care, right? When they're whatever it is, 13, 14, and they're off going to the mall with their friends, but they don't have experience. They're kind of they're easy prey because they're maybe big in size but really low in experience, and it's dangerous for them, but it's so stressful for us parents.
And I think it was fascinating in your book. You point out that there's really two universes where our teens are threatened, and one of them we don't know that much about. That's the internet and the social media and all this kind of stuff that when we were growing up, it was either in its infancy or it didn't even exist. So it's really tough as parents to let our kids go on social media, and I don't really know how to advise them since we're such novices ourselves usually.
We have some interesting ideas for that maybe Barbara can get into in a second for navigating social media with teens. But it was really interesting for us to realize that there's all the the physical meaning for safety, status, sex, and self-reliance, but then all four of those have to be experienced in the digital world as well. Safety from trolls and predators, status, navigating on social media platforms, expressing sexuality online. That can be very difficult for people, or it can also be freeing. It can be a good place to practice. And then finally, self-reliance and creating a self and kind of understanding what that means to be true to oneself. But Barbara, did you want to talk about some of what we found with the social media?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we were really interested in is whether we could use our research to help adolescents who are dealing with high rates of anxiety and depression, which seem to be linked with increased use of social media. Yeah. And so we took a look at what social media is, and basically social media is comparison, right? Yeah. So how many followers do I have versus that person, or who looks better and how many likes did he get or she get versus my post. So it's about comparison. And so we essentially took a look at that idea and thought about the biology of comparison. And it turns out the biology of comparison is driving anxiety and depression in our adolescents who are heavy users of social media. Yeah. And that same biology of comparison we see in fish and in birds and in other mammals. And
even though they're probably not on the internet.
Well, as far as we know. But just to give you a tiny little taste of the things that we found, turns out even when a fish is negatively compared to another fish, her brain chemistry changes in ways that make her behave kind of like a depressed human. And although you can't ask a fish how they feel, it turns out the brain biology, the way that brain biology is affected by being negatively compared to others, we think is a really powerful clue as to why social media can be so dangerous. All those comparisons. Here
they could be very popular in their school setting or with their fellow teens face to face, but they can develop a negative complex based on the internet.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
We don't really have time to get into that in detail, but as scary as the risks and foolishness of our teens' activities and actions, you point out that the experimentation accomplishes one major purpose in life. And what is that purpose?
Well, without the experimentation, I mean, you can't get experience without having experience. So
that's for sure.
Every one of the four areas, during adolescence, animals are practicing, and we might call it experimentation, or sexual experimentation, or flirting, but whether it's trying things that are new, being exposed to some danger, all these things are necessary. And by the way, adolescence is hard across the animal kingdom. Gaining these 4 skills is not easy. And so human adolescents who are struggling are not alone.
No, that's for sure. Well, safety is the first essential challenge that all adolescents must face, whatever their species. As an example, what was the peril that Ursula, the king penguin, faced when she jumped into the water to swim away from her Antarctic home to another location?
Well, what Ursula has waiting for her is leopard seals, which are these, they're beautiful, amazing creatures that they actually have adolescence of their own too, but they have these giant jaws that are big enough to swallow a basketball, and they patrol everywhere that penguins breed, and they know that these penguins that are leaving home for the first time and are inexperienced are the easiest ones to catch.
Yeah.
And so they kind of lurk, and they're ambush hunters, leopard seals are, so they kind of lurk behind icebergs, or they'll float along in the surf, kind of pretending they're a floating piece of debris, and then they strike when these youngsters come out.
Wow. I never considered a seal to be a major predator. I like in your book when you point out the triangle of death in California, where all these sharks, great white sharks, hang out, but the adolescent sea otters swim out there and test the waters, whereas their adult relatives don't go anywhere near that area.
What's really fascinating about the king penguin example, to go back to Ursula, is that first season that they jump in the water, they have a really high mortality rate, right? They're easy prey, they're predator naive, and the leopard seals, see them coming and boom. But every year they survive, they gain experience, and with more experience, they become safer and safer, and their chances of surviving get much, much higher. And this is something that we see, so that by the time, in some years, 70% of them won't survive. Only 30% some years. But then as time goes on, they get more and more competent, and, 90% of them may survive the year. So it's very, very similar to what we see with young drivers, right? So in the beginning, I remember when I was driving in the beginning, there's things that you don't see. And as you become a more experienced driver, right, you see, on that left-hand lane over there's something about the way that guy's driving that doesn't seem right. Yeah. And I can't figure out, but you develop these instincts that just cumulatively make you safer. And that's something that's very much shared with animal adolescents.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. Well, the second challenge faced by adolescents of all species is to find their place in the hierarchy. And I know for humans, and I suspect for other animals, you always want to be around people who are popular, or other animals who are popular within their group, so that rubs off on you. But can you give you have some fascinating examples of animal behavior in your book of seeking this hierarchy. Maybe you can describe one or two of these.
Sure. So we use an example. We actually focus in on hyena society, spotted hyena society, because hyena society is very status conscious. Lots of animal groups are, but hyenas are notoriously status conscious. And hyenas, this particular kind of hyena, the females are in charge. It's a female-dominated society. But the top status, that is the top-ranking female, she has, better access to food, so better nutrition, better immune system. Her offspring have all kinds of benefits. So they're kind of like princelings, and they are given, better nutrition and better safety. And then when they are engaged in contests to see who what their status will be as adults, these hyena mothers, they don't ascribe to the "may the best hyena win" philosophy, right? If their offspring aren't doing well, they intervene, and because they know that having higher status is going to benefit their offspring, increase the chances that their offspring will survive and reproduce themselves.
What about the poor hyena guys? Are they sort of assigned to a lower class?
Yeah.
Like the Indian caste society?
Yeah, it's such a good point because, actually this idea of status is being based on lots of factors in our human societies. And, of course, status is based on all kinds of things, beauty, wealth, but also, let's face it, male, female, there's, big differences. But the same kinds of factors work, are at play in animal societies. They're in play in different ways, but similar phenomenon. And, yes, in some animal societies, being a female is an advantage.
Yeah. Well, they better keep the males around, though, if they want to continue the species. I know certainly the queen ant rules the colony of the queen bee. Well, you also, in your book, have parts all about sexuality and attracting a mate, and also the self-reliance issue. We don't really have time to get into that, but I'd like to ask a couple of final questions. The first one would be, is your book real scientific? Is it so confusing that most of us laypersons wouldn't want to pick it up and try to understand it? Would it be over our heads, or do you have enough in there for the average parent that they could gain a lot out of reading it?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we decided to explore the science through the stories of these 4 really wonderful animals that we got to know over the course of writing the book, and we worked really hard to make it a read that would be enjoyable to anybody who is just interested in teens or interested in the science behind it both. Yeah. And we should say that it was based on the work that we did academically, but while we were writing it, Barbara and I were also parenting adolescents of our own, so we were drawing on our personal experience.
You got to do it to really explain it. No, I read the previews from Amazon, and it's very well written, and certainly I enjoyed the story of Ursula and all of the sea otters out in California, and so I would highly recommend that parents get a hold of it because it's something that definitely they can relate to. So where's the best place for our listeners to go to preview and purchase your book? I assume it's widely available, but...
It is, yes. It's available anywhere books are sold, Amazon.com, local bookstores, Barnes & Noble, anywhere.
Well, that's great. Do you ladies have some kind of a website where we could go to find out more about you, or what? Maybe you look at your other book as well, or what's the best place to go for that?
Yes, well, we do. We have a website, which is WILDHOOD.com, and you'll find not only more information about wild animal adolescence, and particularly how it connects to our own human adolescence. We have videos of wild animal adolescents trying to do the things that they should be able to do, but they haven't yet figured out yet. So it's kind of fun. Usually in a wildlife documentary.
I'll have to go to that website myself. That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, in conclusion, the best way to conclude this segment is to quote from an editorial review, and the following review is from the September 9th, 2019 People magazine, which my wife subscribes to. I didn't realize they had your book reviewed in there, or I certainly would have looked at it. They say, adolescence isn't just for humans. Here, the authors offer up rollicking tales of young animals navigating risk, social hierarchy, and sex with all the bravado and dopiness of our teenage beasts. And from an Amazon reviewer, she says, Wildwood sets a framework for understanding adolescence in all creatures with deep scientific integrity and a narrative style that is fully accessible to the layperson. The authors break new ground in explaining the human condition. Bravo to Natterson-Horowitz and Bowers. WILDHOOD is a must-read for all parents and teachers and for all young adults who want a better understanding of their place in the world. And I would add bravo, my second to that, those positive reviews. And after you read WILDHOOD, I guarantee you as a parent will feel less isolated because you are not alone. We are not alone. All the animals for the past thousands of years have gone through the same challenges that our teenagers are going through. And sure, we all need to set limits and protect the safety of your son or daughter and when they're with their friends, but the stress you are experiencing is necessary, and you and your young adult will come out better in the end. Obviously, there's got to be some limits on what they do, but give them some room for experimentation. And I highly recommend you preview and purchase the book of Dr. Beverly Natterson-Horowitz and Kathryn Bowers, WILDHOOD, and you might find comfort and guidance for your teen from the strangest places, animals throughout the world. And thanks so much, ladies, for joining us here today, and best of continued success with your book. I understand it's doing very well, but continued success.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure it was talking to you today.
Begin this segment with a question for you. Are you a happy person? And if you answered no, here's a second question. Are you destined to be miserable all your life, or can you condition yourself to be more joyful? Well, here's some great news. My guest, Mr. Joyful Living himself, Jim Ryan, author and workshop leader and public speaker, tells us in his long career attests that happiness and joy are like muscles that every one of us have, muscles that can be strengthened through commitment, dedication, and effort. And Jim's here today to share characteristics of happy people and simple steps that anyone, folks like you and me included, can learn to incorporate into our lives. And regular listeners may recall that Jim Ryan was a prior guest on this program in August of last year, 2018. But I have a report in hand that a few of our listeners, perhaps even you, remain unhappy and down on life, so I've invited him back. And for those who don't remember, here's Jim Ryan's bio. He has served as a motivational coach, including online speaker, a retreat and workshop leader, inspiring tens of thousands all over the country, even prisoners, to live a life full of joy, fulfillment, and success in their own terms. And prior to motivational speaking, Jim was a successful independent financial planner, and Jim is a former Irish Christian brother who spent 6 years in religious life, so spirituality plays a big part of his message. And he's author of the popular 2014 book, Simple Happiness, 52 Easy Ways to Lighten Up, and 2 prior books. And as an added bonus, Jim Ryan is an accomplished musician, playing his guitar and singing live in his workshops and speeches. And hello, Jim Ryan. It's great to have you back on Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age.
Thank you very much, Roy. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you tell us there are 8 characteristics of happy people that anyone can learn to incorporate into their lives. You don't necessarily have to give us all 8, but can you please give us at least a few of the most important characteristics?
I'd be happy to, Roy. Now, this is one of my signature talks that I give in the public, and it's really down to earth. It's really about our lives, and people walk out, excited about the possibilities of living a better life. And the idea is to every day be a little happier, a little less disturbable. And if that's your goal, every day, just be a little happier, then things start to work out. And the first characteristic of happy people, Roy, is happy people have the intention to be happy. They want to be happy. It's so important, because we get what we want for the most part. And I start off with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be."
Oh, that's such a good point.
We talk ourselves into and out of things, and many of us are talking ourselves out of being happy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. I don't get it, but that's it's who some people are.
Yeah, they seem to search for excuses of why they should be unhappy and somehow justify their unhappiness. and that makes about as much sense as nothing.
The second, well, you're right on, Roy. The second characteristic is happy people are responsible for their own happiness. There's no blame game. So many people are blaming their parents, their situation, their upbringing for their lot in life. Yeah, everybody's got different circumstances that they come from, but right now, we are responsible for our own happiness. The choices that I make determine whether I'm happy or not. And I say to people, I am the person that I am standing here in front of you today. It's the result of every choice I've ever made in my life. And that's pretty scary. And people want to make an excuse. Oh, Jim, but come on, what about this? What about that? Yeah, okay, everybody's got, issues, but what are you going to do about it? You're going to moan and groan about it, or are you going to try to do a little better?
Yeah. No, I like that a little better each day. That sounds great. Rather than suddenly being Mr. Joy on one easy day.
Well, there's no magic. There's no magic, Roy. We've come to be the people we are by the choices we've made through our lives, by the habits we've developed through our lives, by the patterns of thought that we embrace through our lives. So those things, that's like an ocean liner. An ocean liner. Hard to turn, but it can turn, and that's our happiness quotient also can turn and become better.
Yeah. Well, you also warn us of traps we can fall into that lead to perpetual unhappiness. Can you give us a few of these traps?
Well, one of them is blaming others for their lot in life, and thinking that their problems are just significant to them alone. I'm part of an authors group, and there's a woman in the group who teaches at a community college. Oh. And she, at the beginning of every semester, hands out a blank piece of paper to the students. Some of them are high school grads. Some of them are older people coming back to get a degree. Yeah. So and she says, on the paper, anonymously, write down your 2 or 3 biggest problems. So they all do it. They turn the papers in, and the results are the same year after year after year. Everybody's got the same problems, the same 2 or 3 problems, but people think their problems are significant to them alone. And when people say things, and this is it's all about self-awareness, Roy. We can do a lot if we're paying attention to how we're doing. When you catch yourself saying, "But you don't understand," see, that betrays an attitude that you think your problems are different than anybody else's, and that's a starting point. That's a real starting point to realize that my problems are not significant to me alone.
Yeah, I think another real good point you make is worrying about what other folks think about us.
Well,
we sit around and worry all the time about that. We're destined to be miserable.
Yeah, we want to be liked. We want to have be approved of, and sometimes that just gets ingrained in our mind and in our personality so much that we lose focus on the power that we have within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, from listening to get-rich schemes, you would think that happiness means accumulating as many assets as you possibly can, then living a lavish lifestyle. Does true happiness, is that related to how much we can accumulate?
Well, that's what we're told in our society. Our materialistic America is always telling us to have a better car, have a better house, have a better vacation. Yeah. And it gets drummed into us, and we start to believe it because that's what we pay attention to. Yeah. And see, that's another key point that I try to make to people. And I say energy flows where attention goes. So what you're paying attention to all through the day is what's going to become real in your life. So if
then we resent those who have more than us when we start worrying about accumulation.
That's it. And there's nothing wrong with having stuff, Roy. Nothing wrong with being successful and having a nice car and a beautiful home and so on. Nothing wrong with that. But if that's where your treasure lies, it could be gone in a second.
Yeah, so long as you're not driving up and down the street every day just to show off your car to the neighbors.
Well, that's pretty shallow.
Yeah.
But the point is, we see so many people who seem to have everything in terms of material goods. And what are they doing? They're overdosing on drugs. They're killing themselves. They're divorcing their spouses, and they're miserable. So we're told that should be our goal, but in reality, it's missing the point. That's a big mistake that people make.
Yeah. Well, I know from personal experience that no one renews their life or finds joy at midstream in a vacuum, especially if folks around you remain miserable. Isn't it true that one of the most surefire paths to a life of joy is doing things you like doing, but also that will help someone else become happier and fulfilled?
Well, that's another one of the characteristics. Happy people, they know what makes them happy, and they find time to do it. We all have abilities. We all have likes and dislikes. Yeah. You know, I always ask the question to my audiences, who has something that they love to do, and when they're involved in it, time flies by? And people raise their hand. Some people say gardening. Some people say reading. Some people say working out. And that's important to have something that you like to do because it lowers your stress. It gives you something to look forward to. Yeah. And then I say, I always notice three things. Number one, when somebody raises their hand to share, their face lights up. They can't hide the joy that they experience. Number two, I say, I got 4 people raise their hand. We had 4 different activities that they like to do, and that's the way it should be because we're all individuals. Yeah. And I say, you know what the third thing I always notice? A lot of people didn't raise their hand, you know, and that gets a laugh. But some people don't know what makes them happy. They're just, you know, living a life by default and without really, you know, observing themselves and trying to enjoy themselves.
Yeah. But you can't really be ecstatic and joyful if your spouse is down in the dumps all the time and miserable, and if you do everything just for yourself without doing things to make him or her happy.
That's a real challenge, Roy. I mean, I wish I had the answer to that one because that's see again, a lot of people use this as an excuse, and you know, and there's some reality to it. But again, you can't let other people determine your life. You know, you got to somehow figure out a way to have some joy in your life without. Yeah. You know, disrupting your life and your spouse's life. You know, so it's possible. Counseling, reading, loving, expressing care. You know, people can change. One of the things is get my book. Read my book and give it to your spouse, or read some chapters together. So it's not you talking down to her. It's a third party giving some counsel that's easily understood and easily put into practice.
Well, in your book and in your speeches, you tell us that every one of us has a natural state of mind that is peaceful, successful, low stress, and joyful. Given that, why is it that so many of us are miserable and unfulfilled?
You know, that comes down to meditation, you know, and I always... I really recommend daily meditation, and meditation doesn't have to be anything oppressive. It just means sitting quietly, you know, breathing, and just letting your mind, letting your thoughts, you know, noticing your thoughts and letting them go. Notice your thoughts, letting them go. See, people think their thoughts are their life. That's a big component of my work is understanding that your thoughts are not you. They're just thoughts, and we can let the negative ones go. But it takes practice because, again, we have, just like we have our natural state of mind where it's all good and peaceful and loving, we also have our thought systems, which we've developed over the years, our way of looking at the world, our way of, and it's not easy to overcome. Everything I say, Roy, is simple, but a lot of them are not easy because, you know, people say, well, that's who I am. That's how I've always done it. Well, you know, there is possibilities to have a better life.
Yeah. Simple and easy are not always the same thing.
Absolutely.
Just pointed out. Well, the subtitle of your book is 52 Easy Ways to Lighten Up, and we obviously don't have time to go through all 52, but can you please give us a couple of first steps that listeners could take if they want to be happier?
Yes, I can. I mean, the book is, people love the book, Roy. It's got, it says 52 easy ways. There's 52 short chapters, very easy to read. Even people who don't like to read have read the book and found value in it.
Yeah, I love that organization.
Yeah, the first part is the basics. And the basics, we talk about our thoughts. And they're just thoughts. And the second part is what can we think about? And we try to expand our consciousness. Number one is it's a long life. You know, don't think your life is over because you haven't achieved something that you want to achieve. It's a long life.
Yeah, that's such a trap to fall into.
Yeah, people think they're done. People think I'm too old. I'm not strong enough. I don't have enough money. Come on, that's just all excuses.
Yeah.
And then the third one is take a look at yourself. See, we've got to look inside ourselves and be honest and compassionate. See, compassion is a huge element here too. It's nice to be compassionate to others, but so often we're not so compassionate to ourselves.
Amen.
We got to give ourselves a break. Come on, we're doing the best we can, but stop beating yourself up.
Yeah, if you can't be compassionate to yourself, you probably won't be much good to anyone else.
Well, that's it. We get so angry and stuck with ourselves that it's hard to be, see the possibilities. All we see is the clouds. We don't see the rays of sun coming through. But if we lighten up a little bit and don't take ourselves so seriously, good things can happen.
Yeah. Well, where's the best place for our listener to go to preview and purchase your book, Simple Happiness?
Well, you can go to my website. There's a lot of good stuff on my website, Roy. JimRyanTalks.com. Yeah. That's my name, followed by TALKS.com. You can get the book there. It's also available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon as a softcover book. You can get it as an e-book, a Kindle book. So
I know from your website. I also wanted to point out this great free offer you have of aha moments that a listener can sign up for. Tell us a little about those.
Well, every Wednesday, Roy, I send out what I call an aha moment. It's an uplifting thought, something positive to help you get through the week, and they're free. You can go to my website, JimRyanTalks.com. Right on the front page, there's a place to enter your email address. Put it in there. You'll get on my list, and you'll hear, from me every Wednesday.
It's a great thing to have on Hump Day.
Well, that's it. I just do it once a week. I don't want to make people crazy because email can get nuts. But once a week, we need a lift. That Hump Day, we need something positive to think about, and they're great. People, I'm up to number 591. I've been doing these for over 10 years, and I got thousands.
Come up with that many.
I got thousands of people.
That's pretty impressive.
Well, it's a challenge to me to come up with something new every week, but I love it. It keeps me on my toes.
It's a positive challenge. Well, to conclude, if your life today is not filled with joy, positive thinking, why the heck not? You can't tell me you enjoy being miserable and unfulfilled and blaming someone else or circumstances beyond your control for unhappiness doesn't really help much, does it? And like thousands of others already have, why not trust Jim Ryan when he tells you that every one of us, including you, has a choice, both the choice and the responsibility for reaching a state of perpetual happiness, and it may be far easier than you think. And if you want to change and lighten up your life for the better, right now I highly recommend you get a hold of Jim's book, Simple Happiness, or perhaps sign up for one of his speeches or workshops. And what have you got to lose? And thanks, Jim Ryan, for joining us here today. And you folks out there, if you didn't respond to Jim's advice a year ago, let's hope you do so now. And Jim, best of success in all that you do.
Roy, you got a great show, and you're a great host, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I invite everybody to take your advice and go to my website, get my book. You'll love it.
Yeah, well, best of success in all that you do, and that's our program for today. Tune in again next week, and in the interim, keep in mind at all times, middle age can be your best age. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age, hosted by Roy Richards, an expert on midlife renewal and author of both A Midlife Challenge, Wake Up, and Wake Up, Captain and Crew, Restart Your Engines. You can learn more about Roy and his middle age renewal training system by visiting his website, middleagerenewal.com.